Hello, my name is Jane Bolsover. I am the craft consultant for the WI. In this short skills video, I'm going to show you how to insert a lapped zip. Now, a lapped zip can be used for many applications. It can be in a skirt, the side seam of a dress, but in this particular instance, I'm going to show you how to apply it in a cushion cover. So I've already cut out my pieces, and you'll see that I have one piece smaller than the other because I've decided to insert my zip slightly to one side, because what this will do will be easy for me to insert my cushion pad into the cushion. If I put it into the centre, I've got to really push it into that and push it into there, whereas here I just slide it in and I've just got the corners of the cushion to slide under that section. So what I'm going to do, the pieces of the fabric where I'm going to insert the zip, I have already neatened them. Now you can neaten them either with an overlock if you happen to have one, or a zigzag stitch, or I'm lucky on my sewing machine to have what's called an overcast stitch, so I've overcast them. But what it means is that these seams won't fray. For the seam allowance on my cushion, I've allowed 2.5 centimetres, 25 millimetres, which seems quite a lot, but it's going to give a good flap on my cushion. Right, so first thing we need to do is we need to get a zip, and our zip needs to be shorter than the seam that we're putting it into. So try and purchase one that's at least 8 to 10 centimetres shorter than the seam that you're putting it into. So we have a 2.5 centimetre seam allowance, so you can either mark it with pins or use chalk and make marks. So that's where my seam allowance is. This is just so I know what I'm doing on there. And then I need to mark on the ends here where the ends of my zip are. So put the zip centrally and mark where the ends of your zip are. It's there and it's there. So as I say, that should be equidistant there. So let's move my zip out the way, and I'm going to pin this seam at right angles. You can tack it if you wish. In fact, what I'll do is I'm going to put a pin literally where the end of the zip's going to be. And again where the end of the zip's going to be there. When I say the end of the zips, make sure you're outside what I class as the end stopper. Usually they're plastic now, but sometimes they're metal. And obviously outside where the other end stops are going to be as well, because you don't want to damage your sewing machine by actually sewing over the top of them. So let's pin this here. Now, because we're applying a zip, your machine, like mine, may have clip-on, clip-off feet, where you push in the bottom and the foot comes off like that. With this sewing machine, I have a zipper foot that comes with it, but it hasn't got a very much of a lift above the teeth, so I prefer to use what's called an adjustable zipper foot. And with that, I have to actually unscrew the whole of this ankle, which is the clip-on feet, and put the new foot on. So I've already screwed it onto here, and with this it means we can swing this machine foot wherever we want. Now at the moment, because I'm going to be sewing the seam and doing a straight line, I'm actually having it in the centre here, so that my needle will come down in the centre of the foot. Whatever you do, don't try to do a zigzag stitch with this machine with the foot on, because you'll just break your needle. This is fine for a straight stitch because it's just got a slot in the middle and your needle comes down in the slot. On your sewing machine, you may find that you've got a stitch guide like I have, and it's marked here 10 millimetres, 20 millimetres and 30 millimetres. So obviously our seam allowance is 25 or 2.5. So what I need to do is put my fabric up along that edge. We can check that we're correct because we made that chalk mark. Now we've got a straight stitch here. I've got it set on 2.5. So I'm going to start 2.4 actually. So I'm going to bring that down. I'm holding onto my threads, my bobbin thread and my needle thread, so they don't get pulled down. Do that one stitch. Make sure this is in line with that guide there. And we're going to now do a few stitches forward, reverse, and then we're going to sew all the way up to that pin, which is where our zip's going to start. I'm going to put the needle down and we're going to reverse a few stitches. Then we're going to come back to where we were again, where the zip's going to start, needle down. I'm now going to put my stitch length up to maximum. So that means I'm going to have the longest stitch that I possibly can do on my sewing machine, which is number 5. I'm now going to continue my seam until we get to the end zip. Needle down, I'm then going to shorten my stitch again, add it on 2.4, I'm going to do a few stitches forward, reverse back to my pin, forward again, right to the end and reverse. Right, so now we've got to the end of the seam. Snipping off my ends because I don't like ends, they get caught up and ravelled in everything. So I move the rest of the pins, and then what we've got is I've sewn the whole seam all the way along, but just to recap, we did from there to the end of the zip with the smaller stitch. I then went on to the largest stitch possible on my sewing machine, right up to where the zip starts again. We then went on to the smaller stitch, we reversed, carried on to the end. So what I'm going to do now is where the larger stitch starts and where it finishes, I'm just going to snip through one stitch there, and I'm going to snip through one stitch there. So that's just the first stitch before we go in and out of the shorter stitches. Then we can press this seam open flat, and what's called finger pressing now, so that's running your fingernail along, but you can get an iron and do this. And we need to decide where we're going to have the flap on our lap zip, because with a lap zip one side flaps over the other, and I'm going to have the flap on this smaller section, so that means we're going to work on this section. So now I need my iron because I'm going to press over a seam allowance. So I'm going to fold this hem on this side, so that's that flap that way. I'm going to fold this seam allowance and I'm going to press in 1/4 inch, 6mm, all the way along that seam. So I brought this now to the ironing board and I'm going to press in that little fold that I said, so it's 6mm all the way along the edge. So let me just show you how that looks. So that's our seam open. That was it flat there, and what I've done is I've just folded that back again and folded that there. So I hope you can see that's the seam where the seam is. If we open that up there, you can see there's the stitching for our seam and our fold is here. Now we'd marked before where the end of the zip is, so make sure you mark that again on this bit here. So now we're going to pin our zip underneath here. So I'm lining it up with the end of the thing and I'm going to start to pin our zip to this fold that we've just pressed in. So I've got it about 3mm away from the actual zip teeth. I'm going all the way along here. I'm now going to tack this in place because this is crucial that it doesn't actually slip. So I've got some other coloured tacking thread so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm not going to make a knot in the end, I'm just going to pull it through and do a back stitch, and then I'm going to tack this zip in all the way along. I'm coming to the end here, so that's almost the zip tacked in all the way to the end. And when you get to the end, as I did before, just do a back stitch, because if you do a back stitch, it just makes it easier for you to unpick it. Now we've tacked the zip in place, and I'm going to sew it in place. Now what we need to do is adjust our foot on here, because we can undo the screw and slide it across, so the needle is now to the right hand side of the zipper foot. So I'm going to put those around here out the way, so that there. I'm going to start at this end. You can start right at the end of the fabric. You don't have to start on the zip. Hold those two ends so that they don't go down into the sewing machine. And then we're going to sew, do a bit of reversing, and we're going to go all the way along, probably about 1 millimetre or 2 from the edge. Now I'm opening the zip because that makes it easier for us to do. I'm going to sew all the way along. As I'm getting closer to the zip toggle, I'm going to put the needle down, lift my foot, and then I'm going to close the zip past the zipper foot so that it's well out of the way, and then we can carry on right to the very end. And then reverse stitch at the end. So that is now the first side of our zip sewn in place. So what we have to do now is open the seam up flat, close the zip, and we're going to lay, so it's opening that seam, look, it's nice and flat there, and we're laying the zip down. And actually, if you look, with this seam allowance of 2.5, my zip tape this side is actually in line with the seam allowance on the other side, so I'm going to now pin that in place, so that's keeping those in line. And then I'm going to tack this side of the zip in place as well. So this is the second side of the zip. So again, like we did before, start at this end, a back stitch, and off we go all the way along there. So here we go, so right the way to the end, nearly there. Keeping everything nice and flat. And a little back stitch at the end. So now we've got our zip tacked in on that side, as we can see. That side is all machine stitched in. And we're now going to sew this other side, but we're going to work from the right side of the fabric so that we can see what we're doing, because we want this to be nice and neat around here. So we've got quite a deep seam allowance. If you remember, we've got 2.5 centimetres. So at the moment I have tacked 1.5 centimetres. So that means we can make our flap at least 2 centimetres deep, because we've still got, because our seam allowance was 2.5. So I've tacked 1.5, so that means we've got another centimetre there that we can machine in. I'm going to now swing my zip foot so that my needle is to the left hand side of it, because I'm going to sew up here, along here, and down here. So once again, I want to mark the end of my zip, so I'm just going to mark the end of my zip, which is there, the beginning of my zip, and I'm going to mark the end of my zip, which is about there. And I'm going to start on the actual seam that we did. So put your fabric underneath where you put your pin mark, drop it down, and I want your needle, hold on to those threads so they don't get knotted in, to go right down in this seam. So this is a seam we did right at the very beginning. So your needle is going straight down there. Hold on to those threads, do a couple of stitches, move your pin, and come out. Oops, there we go. A few reverse stitches now to the seam. and then come back out again. So we want to now machine 2 centimetres along here, all the way along there. We want to keep it nice and straight because this is our flap. So I'm just going to do it by measuring it with my tape measure as I go along. But if you want to make it easy, you can get some masking tape. And before you actually put it under here, you can measure along and make sure that this is 2 centimetres all the way along. And then you can use this, I'll put a little one here to see, to sew along the edge of. So you've got your correct seam. So let me just do that there. Check that's 2 centimetres. It's not bad. So you can have that all the way along, and then when you get out to there, just checking that that's going to be okay. Lift your foot, turn the corner, and then you can run your needle all the way along the edge of that tape, and you know that you've got a nice straight line, because that's what we want to do. We want to keep this stitching parallel to our seam line. So I'm just starting on here. And then I'm going to use my tape measure, because obviously I haven't got enough tape on here to show you what I was doing. So I'm going to carry on using my tape measure. That's going to be the end of our flap. So we're almost there. When we get to the pin, drop your needle down, lift your foot, remove the pin, and we're going to now stitch over to the seam again, down into the gap of the seam, reverse stitch, remove this out of here, double check that your zip is caught in, which it is all the way along the edge there. And then what we can do now is we need to remove all our tacking stitches. Right, so that's all my tacking threads out, and now here's the magic. Because if you remember, we snipped that stitch here, because this is our bigger stitches. So what I'm going to do is we very carefully unpick this seam. And then, as if by magic, there we are. How was it? Look. And it looks nice and neat and flat. Thank you for watching. Do tune into our other videos, and then you can put all our videos together. We have 6 little mini skills videos that will all come together to make a beautiful cushion. Thank you.